Graham Whittaker had long stopped dreaming. He stood in the sunroom, barefoot, holding a black coffee he hadn't tasted in days, staring out across the garden he hadn't walked in months. Everything he owned gleamed. The house, the business, the family name, all polished, maintained, managed. And yet, everything inside him remained untouched, frozen. A stillness that hummed beneath his skin like a faint, broken engine. The kind that starts but never moves. His son hadn't spoken in nearly a year. Not a word, not a sound, not since Elise, his wife, his lightning, had passed quietly one evening in that same upper wing, where the scent of lavender still clung to the wallpaper. Downstairs, Rosa, the housekeeper, kept the kitchen running like clockwork. Isaiah, the groundskeeper, trimmed the hedges with gentle focus. But the heart of the house had stopped beating the day Elise's voice disappeared from the halls. And no renovation, no therapy, no paid specialist had been able to bring it back. Then came the knock at the side door, soft, almost reluctant. "Mr. Whittaker?" Rosa's voice carried down the corridor. "That nurse from the agency is here. The one for Miss Luella." He forgot, momentarily, that he'd agreed to lease the guest cottage to a traveling nurse caring for an elderly relative. One of those distant family connections Elise insisted on helping, back when she was still trying to stitch broken branches of their family tree together. "Send her through," Graham replied, not turning from the window. A few minutes later, the front door opened again, and he caught sight of her. She was young, mid-30s maybe, tall, brown-skinned, hair pulled back in a simple twist, wearing pale scrubs beneath a long denim jacket. Her eyes flicked across the hallways as she stepped inside. Curious but careful. She carried a canvas tote slung over one shoulder and a small plastic cooler in the other. Rosa gave her a brief tour, staying formal but polite. Graham overheard snippets as they passed the library. "Jasmine Brooks from Atlanta originally. She's staying in the garden cottage while she tends to her aunt. Miss Luella, right?" "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine said, voice soft but clear. "She's recovering from a fall. Should be on her feet in a few weeks. I'm grateful y'all let us rent so close." Graham didn't move. But something in that voice lingered, like warmth through a crack in the door. Later that afternoon, Graham tried to focus on a video call with one of his board members. Numbers, projections, legal language. But his eyes kept drifting toward the security feed on the corner screen. Camera 5, garden view. There she was again, walking her aunt slowly along the stone path, arm gently looped through hers, talking, smiling. Pausing when Luella leaned in to whisper something, then laughing out loud in a way he hadn't heard in this house for over a year. That laugh pulled something in him, taut. At precisely 4:17 p.m., a sound ripped through the third floor. A shrill, desperate cry. Not a tantrum, not a call, a raw, panicked wail that shot straight through Graham's spine. He shot up from his desk before he even realized he was moving. By the time he hit the second-floor landing, Rosa was already there, her hands wringing a dish towel. "He was fine a minute ago," she said. "He was playing with his puzzles." But Graham didn't wait. He took the steps 2 at a time, flung open the door to Beau's room, and stopped. Beau sat curled in the corner, rocking violently. His hands clenched over his ears. His forehead pressed hard against the floor, again and again, in an aching rhythm. Graham froze. He didn't know how to stop it. He hadn't known for a long time. "Beau," he whispered, stepping forward. Bo flinched harder, curling tighter into himself. Behind him, a soft voice cut the tension. "Let me try." He turned. Jasmine stood in the doorway. What are you doing up here?" he asked sharply. "I heard the sound," she said simply, "and I recognized it." He hesitated, unsure why he didn't tell her to leave, but something in her expression, a kind of practiced tenderness, held him back. She knelt down slowly, keeping a respectful distance from Bo. No sudden moves. She sat cross-legged, palms resting open on her knees, and began to hum. It wasn't a song he recognized. It was old, maybe gospel, maybe just southern enough to feel like Sunday light through stained glass. Gentle, slow, comforting. Bo's rocking softened. Just barely. Jasmine didn't speak. She only continued the hum, softer now, like breath over warm tea. And then, without lifting her hands, she signed a single word. Safe. It was deliberate, small, but it hung in the room like a lifeline. Bo paused. His little eyes flicked toward her, just for a beat, and then returned to the floor. Stillness. Not peace, not calm, but a stillness Graham hadn't seen in months. His throat tightened. He turned to Jasmine, still stunned. "How did you—" "My brother," she said quietly. "Used to rock like that. Same sound, same silence afterward. That's what the music was for." Graham didn't speak. After a long pause, Jasmine stood slowly. "I'll go," she added. "I didn't mean to cross a line." But as she stepped back toward the door, Bo shifted. Without a sound, he reached one small hand toward her, fingers grazing the hem of her jacket. She stopped. Graham stared. He had brought in consultants from Yale, therapists from Charleston, even spent $10,000 on a private coach from Boston who had lasted exactly 3 days. And now this stranger, this nurse, had done what no one else could, with a song and silence. "Would you stay a little longer?" he asked before the words could slip away. Jasmine blinked, then nodded. "Of course." She sat back down. Bo leaned gently against her knee, a breath of a sigh escaping his lips. The house exhaled with him, and for the first time in a very long time, Graham didn't feel alone inside it. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Jasmine stood at the nursery window, arms folded, watching the late sun pour gold across the garden. Bo had drifted to sleep minutes earlier, curled up in a weighted blanket, one hand clutching a small fabric elephant worn at the edges. He hadn't said a word, but his body had relaxed, like a thread finally unknotted. She hadn't meant to stay this long. She hadn't planned to be in this house at all. Behind her, the soft click of the door made her turn. Graham stood there, hands in the pockets of his navy slacks, the faintest crease between his brows. No suit jacket this time, no phone in hand. Just him, tall and hesitant, as if unsure whether he was welcome in his own home. "You didn't have to stay," he said, voice quiet. She shrugged gently. "He didn't want me to leave." Graham looked at his son, then back at her. "He usually doesn't want anyone around at all." Jasmine offered a small smile. "Sometimes it's not about wanting, it's about needing. We forget the difference." A pause stretched between them, long enough to breathe, but not long enough to settle. "You have training with autistic children?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. "No," she said honestly. "Just experience. My younger brother, Terence, was nonverbal. Similar behaviors. I learned early on how to sit in silence with someone. Graham looked down. Most people try to fix the silence and miss what it's saying, she replied, her voice soft but certain. Another pause. Then he motioned toward the hallway. Walk with me? She glanced once more at Beau, who hadn't stirred, then nodded and followed. They moved quietly through the second-floor corridor. The house felt different with him beside her, less like a museum and more like something alive, though barely breathing. You've been here less than a day, and already walked into the most guarded room in the house, he said, as they descended the stairs. I didn't mean to intrude. But you did. She stopped at the foot of the staircase, turning to face him. Would you rather I hadn't? His gaze lingered. I don't know. That honesty surprised her. They reached the kitchen, where the last of the daylight flickered through the stained glass above the sink. Rosa had left a pitcher of lemon water on the counter. Graham poured 2 glasses, offered her one without words. She took it, noticing his hands. Not soft, not calloused either, just tired. I assume you'll want to keep your original schedule, he said after a beat. Help with your aunt. Work mornings. Clean when needed. That was the arrangement. But Beau, his voice faded. He doesn't respond to schedules. I noticed. I've had experts come in. All of them failed. Jasmine sipped her water, then set the glass down. Sometimes a stranger can see what family forgets. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. And what is it you see? She looked him in the eyes then, truly looked. And for a second, it was like staring at someone standing just beyond a storm cloud. There, but hidden. A house full of echoes, she said, and a boy who's been waiting for someone to just sit still. He didn't answer, didn't blink. The silence hung heavy, thick with things unsaid. Then, the sound of the front door creaked open. A woman's voice rang out. Graham? Jasmine turned. A tall blonde woman entered, heels clicking across the floor, wrapped in a beige trench coat despite the warmth. Her makeup was immaculate. Her smile wasn't. There you are, she said breezily. I stopped by earlier, but Rosa said you were busy. Board meeting run long? Graham straightened. His tone shifted. Claire, this isn't a good time. Claire's eyes landed on Jasmine with practiced interest. Oh, I didn't know you had company. I'm not company, Jasmine said, calm but firm. Just the nurse. Claire tilted her head, scanning her. Ah, of course. Graham cleared his throat. She's helping with my son. Claire raised an eyebrow. I thought you hired someone from Charleston for that. She lasted 4 days, Graham said flatly. And this one's temporary? Jasmine felt her pulse rise, but her face stayed neutral. She turned to Graham. If you need anything else from me, I'll be out in the garden cottage. She walked past Claire, chin high, shoulders square. Graham didn't stop her. Outside, the evening air wrapped around Jasmine like a balm. Crickets had started their nightly hymn, and the hydrangeas near the side path swayed gently in the breeze. She made her way toward the guest house, quietly, deliberately. But the sting behind her ribs lingered. Not at Claire's tone, but at how quickly Graham had let her go. She entered the cottage and dropped her bag by the entry table, exhaling hard. She wasn't here for pride. She wasn't here for status. But she also wasn't here to be invisible. A soft knock came 10 minutes later. She opened the door to find Graham there. No jacket, no shield. He didn't step inside. "I didn't handle that well," he said. "No, you didn't." He looked at her, something unspoken catching in his throat. Claire was Elise's closest friend. She's still protective. Of you? Of what this house used to be. Jasmine held his gaze. And what is it now? Graham didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Beau woke up after you left. Called out." Her heart stopped. "Not words," he added quickly. "Just a sound, a soft one, like he was expecting someone." She swallowed. It wasn't me he was looking for. "It might have been," Graham said. "I just didn't know what to do." Jasmine stepped out onto the small porch, wrapping her arms around herself. "You don't have to know. You just have to stay." He looked at her, like the words carried more weight than he was ready for. "I want to try," he said quietly. Jasmine nodded. "Then you already started." Graham took a small step back, lingering. "Tomorrow, would you come by earlier? Just to sit with him? Maybe play that music again?" "I can do that." He nodded, eyes lingering longer this time. "Good night, Jasmine." "Good night, Graham." As he walked away, the porch light hummed above her. She leaned against the frame and closed her eyes, listening to the silence that no longer felt empty. It was beginning to breathe. The sun was barely up when Jasmine stepped out of the cottage, thermos in hand, her sneakers softly pressing into the dew-covered path that curved toward the main house. Savannah mornings always smelled like wet earth and honeysuckle, a scent that lingered in the air like a half-kept promise. The mansion stood quiet, shadows still tucked between its shutters and railings, a place so grand, yet so hollow in the early light. She paused at the garden's edge. Some part of her still asked, "What are you doing here?" Another part answered, "Exactly what you were meant to do." Inside, Rosa was already brewing coffee. The older woman greeted Jasmine with a nod and a knowing smile. "He's been awake since 6, Rosa said, sliding a warm muffin onto a plate and pushing it gently in Jasmine's direction. Didn't cry. Just sat up, waiting. Jasmine blinked. Waiting? Didn't say a word, but something in the way he looked at that door, like he expected you. Jasmine took the muffin, heart tugging in that quiet way it always did when something small cracked through the ordinary. She headed up to Beau's room, each step echoing slightly on the polished staircase. At the threshold, she paused. He was there, sitting in the middle of the room, his blanket draped over his shoulders like a cape. He looked up at her the moment she appeared, then pointed to the corner where she'd sat the day before. Jasmine smiled softly. "You want me to sit again?" He tapped the floor twice with his small palm. So she did. She pulled her thermos from her bag, opened it, and let the soft scent of chamomile drift into the room. Then she started humming, just gently, the same tune from the night before, this time a little slower, like the rhythm of rocking on a porch swing. Beau tilted his head, swayed once, then crawled closer, closer, until his knee brushed hers. Jasmine froze, not out of fear, out of reverence. This moment was holy in its own way. After a few minutes, his fingers touched the edge of her sweater. A small, almost invisible gesture, seeking warmth, seeking her. Downstairs, the sharp sound of heels clacking against tile broke the moment. Claire. Jasmine exhaled through her nose and gave Beau a reassuring smile before rising slowly. "Be right back, buddy." He didn't cry, just watched. Jasmine reached the landing in time to hear Claire's voice cutting through the morning calm. "I don't understand what's happening here, Graham. First, she's in his room. Now she's here at dawn." "She's helping," Graham replied, restrained. Claire folded her arms, jaw tight. "You don't even know her, Graham. She could be anyone. You're letting a stranger shape your son's recovery. Do you hear how that sounds? She's the first person he's responded to in almost a year. She's a nurse, not a specialist." "Not a therapist. You hired a housekeeper with a sweet voice." Jasmine stepped into the room without hesitation. "I'm not a specialist," she said calmly, "and I've never pretended to be." Claire turned, unsurprised. "Then I don't understand what you think you're doing here. I don't need you to understand." Jasmine's voice was still calm, but there was no apology in it now. "Beau does. And yesterday, for the first time, he reached out. He chose me." Claire scoffed. "Children reach for things. That doesn't mean they're making decisions." Graham stepped between them, his tone firmer now. "That's enough, Claire." Claire's gaze flicked to him. "You don't see what's happening. You're vulnerable. I'm right here," Jasmine interrupted. "If you have something to say about me, you can say it to me." The room went quiet. A tension hung there. Too quiet, too tight. Claire narrowed her eyes. "You think just because you sing a lullaby, you've earned a place here?" "This is a legacy estate, not a rescue mission." Jasmine's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I didn't come here to be anything to you, Claire. I came to take care of my aunt. And I stepped into Beau's world because he let me in. That's the only invitation I needed." Claire's lips pressed into a line. "Graham, this is a mistake." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she arrived. "I think you should go," he said, not unkindly, but firmly. Claire blinked. Once. Then she nodded. "Don't say I didn't warn you." She left with sharp steps and silence. After the door closed, Graham let out a breath, like he'd been holding it in for years. "I'm sorry," he said. Jasmine shook her head. "Don't apologize for her." He turned toward her, voice low. "No, I'm sorry for not saying something sooner. You shouldn't have had to defend yourself." Their eyes locked, and in that space, something shifted. Not romance, not yet, but the weight of acknowledgement. Of a man who finally saw her clearly. "I know you're not here for us," he said quietly, "but you're here, and I'd like you to stay." Jasmine searched his face. "As Beau's nurse?" "As the one person he's chosen to trust." She nodded slowly. "Then I will." He looked toward the stairs. "Come back up when you're ready. I think he's waiting." She lingered a moment longer, then turned back toward the hallway. Beau was sitting on the rug again, exactly where she left him. Only now he held 2 fabric elephants, one in each hand, and when she knelt down, he offered one to her. She took it without a word. And they sat there together, 2 unlikely pieces of a broken puzzle, finding a rhythm. Outside, the morning lifted into full light, and for the first time since she arrived, the house didn't feel quite so closed. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The garden bloomed louder than ever that morning. Azaleas flared in bursts of pink and coral along the winding path, and jasmine vines curled tightly around the wrought iron trellis, humming with bees. Jasmine Brooks leaned against the wooden bench just beneath the willow, her hands stained slightly from pulling weeds, her breath slowing after an hour of quiet work beside Beau. He sat cross-legged in the soft grass a few feet away, stacking smooth river stones from smallest to largest. Each time he completed the tower, he gently tapped the top stone and looked to her for a nod. She'd return a smile and a little clap, and he'd start over, more focused than the last. No therapist had ever gotten him to play this long. Graham watched from the sunroom, unseen. He didn't mean to spy, but something about the way Jasmine moved, intentional, unhurried, grounded, held him in place like a song he didn't know he remembered. Rosa stepped into the room behind him, with folded linens in her arms. "She brings light with her," Rosa said gently, nodding toward the window. Graham kept his eyes on the garden. "Beau's different when she's around. And you?" He turned his head. "I'm trying." "She ain't your wife," Rosa added, not unkindly. "And I don't think she's trying to be. But that boy, he's showing you the way forward." Graham didn't answer. He didn't need to. The ache behind his ribs said enough. Out in the garden, Jasmine glanced at her watch. Nearly noon. Time for Beau's snack. She opened the small basket beside her, pulled out a cut-up apple and some cheese squares, and set them between them on a napkin. Beau looked up, blinked twice, then inched closer. He picked a slice, took one bite, then reached for another, and without looking, held it out to her. Jasmine froze. Her hand met his halfway. A silent exchange. A gesture of trust. So small, it could have been missed if you weren't paying attention. But Graham saw it. Later that afternoon, Jasmine stood at the sink in the guest cottage, washing a coffee mug when a knock tapped against the screen door. She dried her hands and pulled it open. Graham stood there with a small cardboard box in his arms. "I found these in the attic," he said. "They were releases." Jasmine stepped aside. "You want to come in?" He nodded once and followed her in, setting the box gently on the small table. "She used to teach music to kids," he said, flipping the lid back. Inside were small rhythm instruments, bells, a triangle, a set of wooden blocks. "We tried with Beau before, but he wasn't ready." Jasmine picked up the triangle, running her fingers along the cool metal. "Music remembers even when we don't." "She believed that too," Graham said, then quieter. She had a voice like honey. Jasmine looked up. "What about you? What about me? You ever sing?" He chuckled. "I don't remember the last time I tried. Maybe in the car." "Years ago." "You don't have to be good. You just have to mean it." Their eyes met, and something in the air shifted. Not attraction in the shallow sense, but something deeper. Recognition. A quiet understanding of grief and hope coexisting in the same room. "I thought maybe you could use these with him," Graham said, pulling his gaze away. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Thank you." He lingered for a moment, fingers tapping the table's edge. "I'm hosting a fundraiser here next week," he added, almost reluctantly, "for the Autism Learning Collaborative. We do it every year." Jasmine raised her brows. "In this house?" "Claire pushed for it," he said with a sigh. "It's more of a networking event now than anything meaningful, but it helps with the grants." She waited. "I was wondering if you'd come," he continued. "Not as staff, as a guest." Jasmine blinked. "Me?" "Yes." Her instinct bristled. "Why?" "Because I want people to see who you are, what you're doing here. And maybe because I don't want to do it alone." The pause that followed felt heavy, not awkward. Measured. "I'll think about it," she said finally. He nodded, lips pressed into something close to a smile. "That's all I ask." The next morning, Jasmine stood beside the porch swing at Miss Luella's cottage, pouring 2 glasses of peach tea as her aunt swayed gently, watching the moss flutter in the breeze. "You're being careful," Luella said without looking at her. Jasmine handed her a glass. With what? That man. Jasmine sat down slowly. He's grieving. They all are, baby. You don't fall into a man's grief thinking you can carry it for him. I'm not. Luella turned to face her, eyes sharp and kind. Just be sure. Love born from loneliness don't always survive daylight. Jasmine sipped her tea, the words soaking deeper than she let on. I think it's not about him, she said finally. It's about Beau. And you, Luella added. Don't forget that. That evening, after Beau had fallen asleep, Jasmine sat on the back porch of the mansion with a small tambourine in her lap. The wind had cooled, the sky bleeding orange and violet across the horizon. She began to hum again, low, steady. The same tune from that first day. Then she added the rhythm, tapping gently on the frame, letting the soft sound ripple outward like ripples in a pond. Behind her, a voice joined in. Not loud, not certain, but there. Graham. He sang only a single line, just one, but his voice cracked halfway through it. He stopped, embarrassed. Jasmine didn't turn. She just kept playing. You remembered, she said softly. I didn't know I still could. You never forgot. They sat in the silence that followed, not filling it with noise. Above them, the wind chime swayed, carrying the tune Beau had once only rocked to. And in that quiet, the story began to bend, not into love, not yet, but into the possibility of it. And that was enough. Beau stood at the edge of the sensory room, holding the triangle Jasmine had introduced to him earlier that week. His little fingers trembled slightly around the metal, his eyes flicking back and forth between her and the doorway, as if waiting for something, or someone, to make the moment crumble. You can tap it whenever you're ready, Jasmine said gently, crouching to his level. There's no wrong way. Beau hesitated, then, ting. A soft, clear note rang out. He smiled, just barely, then hit it again. Ting. Jasmine clapped once, not too loud. That's beautiful, Beau. Behind them, Graham leaned against the doorframe, silent, but moved. He didn't know what hit harder, the sound of that tiny chime, or the expression of pride that followed it. His son looked taller somehow, braver. He's doing this on his own? Graham asked softly, once Beau returned to his puzzle mat. Jasmine nodded. All I did was give him a new way to speak. They stood together in the hallway for a moment, watching. I meant what I said about the fundraiser, Graham said, voice low. Claire won't like it, but I don't care. I haven't said yes. You haven't said no. Jasmine tilted her head toward him, lips curved. That's true. He chuckled under his breath, then cleared his throat. You'd look good in that ballroom. She raised an eyebrow. Is that flattery or a bribe? Observation. She narrowed her eyes playfully. You sure you remember how to flirt? I wasn't trying to, he said, then paused. But maybe I should. The space between them grew quieter, the kind of quiet that asks a question neither dares answer. Before Jasmine could respond, Rosa's voice called from downstairs. Mr. Whitaker, Claire's here. Jasmine's expression stiffened. Of course she is. Graham looked toward the staircase. Stay here. I'll handle it. He headed down, steps even but tense. Jasmine watched from the railing above, heart pulled taut. Claire stood in the front room in a slim beige dress, pearls around her neck, tablet in hand. She looked polished, powerful, and pointed. "I just heard you sent out invites with Jasmine listed as a guest," she said, skipping all pleasantries. "That's correct. She's staff, Graham. This is a donor event, not a mixer." "She's more than staff," he said, voice measured. "She's the only person in a year who's gotten Beau to connect." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Are you romantically involved?" He didn't answer immediately. "No, but I might want to be." Claire's lips parted slightly. The blow landed deeper than she expected. "This is a terrible idea. I'm not asking your permission." "She's temporary," Claire hissed. "You're building castles in the sand." "She's building something," Graham snapped back. You're protecting a memory." Claire took a shaky breath. "You're going to humiliate yourself. And Beau, when she leaves, and she will, it's going to wreck him." Jasmine didn't need to hear more. She turned from the railing and quietly slipped back into Beau's room, her chest tight. She didn't blame Claire. Not entirely. The woman was grieving too, just in a different key. That night, Jasmine sat outside the cottage with her laptop open, watching the cursor blink on a blank email. A reply to the fundraiser invitation Graham had sent. 3 times she typed, "I'll attend," then deleted it. Behind her, the screen door creaked. Miss Luella stepped out, wrapped in her thick floral robe, easing into the rocker beside her. "You're restless," Luella said. Jasmine closed the laptop. "Just thinking. Don't lie to your own blood, child." Jasmine smiled faintly. "It's complicated." "No, it ain't. Complicated is what people say when something feels too good to be safe." "What you feel, now that's simple. I don't want to mislead him." "You think he don't know the risk?" Luella asked, eyes sharp. "That man's walking on a wire just like you. You both carrying grief like wet coats. But you're learning how to take yours off." Jasmine looked out into the dark. "His son," she whispered. "Beau needs something real. I'm not sure I'm permanent enough to give that." Luella reached over, her hand warm on Jasmine's. "Sometimes, showing up while you can means more than promising you'll never leave." Jasmine swallowed the lump in her throat. The next morning, she entered the house early, dressed in light blue and soft sneakers. Graham was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, flipping pancakes, while Beau clutched a small whisk in both hands, proudly helping. "She said yes," Graham called without looking up. Jasmine blinked. "What?" "You're coming to the fundraiser," he said with a grin. "Rosa told me. She saw the RSVP." Jasmine crossed her arms. "You check your inbox this early?" "For you? Yes." She shook her head, but her smile betrayed her. Beau tapped the triangle on the counter, once. Then again, a rhythm, a song, and Jasmine felt it, without warning. The first flutter of something terrifying and true blooming in her chest. She looked at Graham. He looked back, and the room, just for a second, felt like the start of something neither of them were ready to name. Not yet, but soon. The evening sun dipped low behind the oak trees as the first round of guests arrived, their luxury sedans gliding up the cobblestone drive in perfect choreography. The Whitaker estate, usually quiet, reserved, heavy with memory, had transformed. String lights wove through the garden trellis, casting soft golden shadows across linen-covered tables. Classical jazz hummed in the background, elegant but distant, like it didn't want to get too involved. Jasmine stood in front of the mirror inside the guest cottage, smoothing the front of her deep emerald dress. It wasn't expensive, but it fit her right. Clean lines, just enough shape, a quiet confidence sewn into every seam. Her hair was swept up with loose curls framing her face. No sparkle, no show, just her. She stared at her reflection for a long moment. "You don't owe them anything," she whispered to herself. "Just be present." Outside, footsteps crunched softly on the gravel. Then a knock. She opened the door. Graham stood there in a tailored charcoal suit, no tie, top button open. His eyes swept over her once, quick, respectful, but when they met hers, they lingered. "You look breathtaking," he said, and the words carried a tremble like they hadn't been used in years. She exhaled a small laugh. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He offered his arm. "Walk with me?" She looped her hand through his, and together they moved toward the house, the sounds of clinking glasses and polite laughter growing louder as they approached the garden entrance. As they rounded the corner, conversations paused. Just briefly. A few heads turned. One woman whispered something to another. Claire, stationed near the central fountain, froze mid-sip. Jasmine kept her eyes forward, chin lifted. Graham leaned in, murmuring, "They'll talk." "Let them," she said, not breaking stride. Inside the ballroom, waiters weaved between guests with trays of wine and smoked salmon crostini. Jasmine spotted a few familiar faces. Members of the board, people she'd seen in framed photos hung in the study. All of them looked polished, controlled. A tall woman in navy approached. "Graham, darling," she gushed, "you didn't say you were bringing a guest." "This is Jasmine Brooks," he said easily. "She's been instrumental in Beau's progress." The woman offered a hand, clearly measuring Jasmine head to toe. "How admirable. And what do you do, Miss Brooks?" "I listen," Jasmine replied, eyes steady. "And I show up." The woman blinked, surprised, then offered a tight smile and drifted away. Graham leaned close. "You're doing great." "I wasn't performing," she whispered back. "I know. That's what makes it great." Claire moved toward them with the precision of someone approaching a chessboard. She wore a midnight blue dress and her sharpest smile. "Jasmine," she said, "you look lovely. That shade suits you." "Thank you," Jasmine said. "It's my aunt's. She wore it to her anniversary party 30 years ago." Claire's smile stiffened. "Vintage, then." Graham cut in, tone light but firm. "Claire, have you seen Beau's latest art projects? Jasmine's been encouraging his visual play." Claire barely blinked. "So she's become a therapist too?" Jasmine stepped forward, voice calm. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I just meet him where he is." Claire's eyes glinted. "And where will you be in 6 months?" The question hung in the air. Jasmine didn't answer right away. She didn't need to, because just then, Beau entered the room, led by Rosa, wearing a tiny blazer over his favorite sneakers, a triangle clutched in one hand. The entire room quieted. Beau didn't scan the crowd. He went straight to Jasmine and stood beside her. She knelt down slowly. "You okay, buddy?" He held out the triangle, then he struck it. Once. Twice. The room stayed silent. Beau turned to Graham. "Mama." A hush fell. One word, soft, almost broken, but real. Graham froze. His hand rose halfway before falling to his side. He stepped forward, kneeling next to his son. "Say that again," he whispered. Beau looked at Jasmine, then at his father, then whispered, "Mama." Tears blurred Graham's vision. He swallowed hard. "It's okay," Jasmine said, gently touching Beau's shoulder. "Sometimes memories speak before we do." Claire took a slow step back, speechless. Graham turned to Jasmine, eyes wet. "He hasn't said a word in months, and now, that." "He's trying," Jasmine said. "He's opening up." He rose slowly, turned to the crowd that had gathered in silent witness. "My son is speaking again," he said quietly. "And tonight's not about money or networks. It's about connection. And this woman," he looked at Jasmine, "is the reason why." The room broke into soft, genuine applause. Claire turned away, slipping out of sight. Later, beneath the stars on the back patio, Jasmine stood at the railing, the night air cooler now. Graham joined her, 2 glasses of sparkling cider in hand. "To Beau," he said. They clinked glasses. "And to whatever this is," he added, looking at her. Jasmine smiled. One moment at a time. He didn't press. He didn't have to. And beside them, through the window, Beau twirled slowly in the center of the ballroom, triangle in hand, letting its song ring out into the night. The morning after the fundraiser dawned quiet and slow, the kind of hush that followed emotional storms. Jasmine sat on the edge of the garden swing, a warm mug of black tea cupped between her hands. The porch was still damp from an early rain, and the scent of wet magnolia drifted through the air. She could still feel the echo of Beau's voice. "Mama." Just one word, just one breath, but it had cracked something open in all of them, especially Graham. Her heart hadn't stopped thudding since... The porch door creaked behind her. "Didn't mean to wake you," Graham said, his voice low and sleep-roughened. "You didn't?" She turned. He stood barefoot, tie in one hand, sleeves rolled, the top button of his dress shirt still undone. "You look like you slept 3 hours." 2.5, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "But worth it." Jasmine scooted to make space. He hesitated for just a second before lowering himself beside her, the swing creaking under the new weight. "Beau's still asleep?" "For now." Rosa said he was humming in his sleep. Graham chuckled. "I think he likes being the center of attention." "Only when he chooses it," Jasmine said. "That's the difference." They rocked slowly for a moment, the rhythm of the swing sinking their breathing. "I keep thinking about what he said," Graham murmured. "That one word. I've been trying to decide if it was memory or something else." "It was both," Jasmine said. "Grief speaks in echoes. So does healing." He looked at her then. Really looked. "You were right. You said it wasn't about wanting. It was about needing. And last night proved it." She met his gaze, steady and open. "You're doing more than surviving now, Graham." He looked down, thumb grazing the side of his mug. "It's been a long time since I felt like I was doing anything right. You're not alone in that." The silence between them softened, a thread stretched taut, but no longer afraid to snap. "I meant what I said last night," he added, "about you, about what this is." Her breath caught, and she set her mug down gently on the table beside them. "Graham, I'm not rushing anything," he said quickly, "but I'm not pretending anymore either. You've become more than Beau's nurse, more than a tenant." She looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what am I?" He reached over, took her hand, fingers warm, steady. "Someone I can't imagine this house without." Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't let the tears fall. "You don't have to say that just because you're grateful." I'm saying it because it's true. She wanted to lean into the moment, to let herself believe in something soft and unexpected. But part of her still held back. The part trained by disappointment, by temporary roles and half-kept promises. Just then, the porch screen creaked again. Miss Luella emerged, arms folded, one eyebrow raised. Well, if this ain't the sweetest sunrise I've seen all week. Jasmine pulled her hand back, cheeks flushing. Morning, Aunt Lou. Graham rose, offering Luella a nod. Miss Luella. She gave him a look that saw everything. You planning on keeping that girl's heart in one piece? Graham blinked, then smiled. That's the only plan I've got. Luella nodded once, satisfied, then shuffled toward the garden path with her watering can in hand. Jasmine exhaled a slow laugh. Subtle, as always. She's not wrong. No, she isn't, Jasmine said, then added, Neither are you. Graham's smile softened. Come with us this weekend. She turned. Us? I'm taking Beau to the coastal center. There's a sensory aquarium exhibit. Thought maybe you'd join, like a family outing? He nodded. Something like that. I'll think about it, she said, but her voice had already said yes. Later that day, Jasmine stood in Beau's room, watching him stack blocks into a winding spiral. He hummed softly to himself, a tune she recognized from their porch duet. Rosa passed by the door, carrying folded laundry. He hasn't done that since Elise, she said quietly. What? Sang. Even in fragments. Rosa smiled. He's remembering how to feel safe. Jasmine bent down, brushing a hand over Beau's hair. He's remembering how to trust. That night, Jasmine sat on her bed, scrolling through old voicemails from her brother Terence. The last one played back in his usual rhythm, choppy, bright, pure. Jazz. You hear me? I miss you. I like the rain today. Feels like the sky's playing drums. Call me back. She closed her eyes. Terence had taught her patience. Beau was teaching her courage. And Graham was reminding her what it felt like to be chosen, not for convenience, but for presence, for truth. She opened her journal and scribbled a single line. Some songs don't need music to be remembered. She closed the book, heart lighter. Outside, the wind picked up. The wind chime on the porch sang a familiar note, Beau's rhythm. And from somewhere in the house, faint but steady, came Graham's voice, singing low, carrying the melody forward into the dark. The sky was low and gray as the car pulled off the highway onto the long coastal road, the trees bending gently under the hush of salty wind. In the back seat, Beau pressed his hand to the window, tracing the outline of a passing egret with his finger. His lips moved in silence. He wasn't speaking, but he was aware, engaged, present. That alone made the drive feel like magic. Jasmine glanced at him through the rearview mirror. You okay back there, Beau? He nodded once, still focused on the world sliding past the glass. Graham sat in the passenger seat beside her, sleeves rolled to his elbows, sunglasses pushed back into his hair. He looked over at Jasmine with a quiet kind of smile, the kind that said thank you for saying yes without needing the words. This place, he said, pointing to a hand-painted sign that read Savannah Coastal Discovery Center, was Elise's favorite. We brought Beau here for his 4th birthday. He didn't say a word the whole time, but he touched every tank. Every single one? Jasmine smiled. Yep, especially the jellyfish exhibit. Something about the movement kept him still. Beau tapped the back of Graham's seat twice, gently. Graham turned. You remember? Beau didn't respond with words. but he nodded again, more assured. When they arrived, the building stood like a modern cathedral of glass and wood, open, light-filled, inviting. Inside, the cool air was tinged with salt and the soft buzz of interactive exhibits. Kids darted past with guidebooks and stickers, voices bouncing off the high ceilings, but in the middle of it all, Beau was still. He stepped into the touch pool room and immediately gravitated toward the Stingray basin. Graham and Jasmine followed at a slight distance, letting him lead. A young guide in a navy polo approached them. "Hi there." He can gently run 2 fingers along the raised backs if he wants. They're very friendly. Beau looked up at the guide, then at Jasmine. She crouched down, voice low and even. "Only if you want to, sweetheart." He hesitated. Then, with extreme care, he reached into the water and brushed his fingers across the slick surface of a passing ray. His mouth parted in awe. Graham exhaled beside her. "I don't think I've ever seen him that open." "You're giving him space," Jasmine said. "That's where safety grows." As they continued, they entered the jellyfish tunnel, a long, curved hallway lit only by soft blue panels glowing with floating creatures. Beau stopped halfway through, staring up, transfixed. Jasmine stood beside him, letting the silence bloom between them like a warm tide. "It's like they're dancing," she whispered. Beau tilted his head. "Do you want to dance too?" she asked gently. He didn't answer, but his shoulders moved, just a little sway back and forth, a rhythm only he could hear. Graham stepped closer, pulling out his phone. "I want to remember this." But before he could hit record, Jasmine placed her hand on his arm. "Let him be. Some memories are just for the heart." He looked at her for a moment, then slowly slid the phone back into his pocket. As the day wound down, they found a quiet bench outside overlooking the marsh. A few kayakers glided through the water below, their paddles moving in slow, deliberate strokes. Beau sat between them, munching on apple slices, his legs swinging beneath the bench. "I haven't seen him eat this much in weeks," Graham said, watching him. "Experiences are nourishment too," Jasmine said. "They feed parts of us that don't get touched by routine." Graham turned toward her, his voice softer. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Speak like that. Like your words come from someplace deeper." Jasmine shrugged, eyes on the water. "I've spent most of my life with people who didn't use words the way others do. My brother Terence taught me how to listen with more than my ears." Graham waited, sensing the weight in her voice. "He's on the spectrum," she added. "Music was our bridge growing up. We didn't always talk, but we always sang." Graham's gaze didn't leave her. "Is that why you're so good with Beau?" "I think it's why I don't try to fix him," she said. "He's not broken." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for her hand, slowly, deliberately. And this time, she didn't pull away. "I know this might sound like too much," he said, "but I think I'm beginning to feel again. Things I forgot how to name." Jasmine looked at their joined hands. "That's the start of healing." Just then, Beau leaned his head against Jasmine's arm. Not with drama or need, just trust. The sun caught in his hair, and for a second, he looked like he was glowing. Graham cleared his throat, voice husky. "You don't know what this means to me." "I do," she said, "because it means something to me too." They sat that way for a while, the three of them, wrapped in a hush that wasn't silence but something fuller, more alive. As the sky softened into pink and lavender, Beau hummed under his breath, barely audible, just a few broken notes. but they matched the lullaby Jasmine had sung on her first night in the house. And Graham smiled, because now he heard it too. It was the morning after their visit to the coastal center, and the Whitaker house held a rare calm. Light spilled through the breakfast nook windows, warming the hardwood floors. Rosa hummed softly in the kitchen as she set out a tray of sliced fruit, toast, and eggs. The scent of cinnamon and coffee hung in the air. Graham leaned against the doorway, watching Jasmine pour orange juice into Beau's favorite mug, the one with the stars that changed color with heat. Beau sat at the table already, tapping the base of his cup with the handle of a plastic spoon, rhythmically and patiently. "I swear, I've never seen him this steady in the mornings," Graham said, voice low but warm. "He's getting what he needs," Jasmine replied, setting the juice down gently. "It doesn't mean he won't have tough days, but he knows he's seen now. That's what matters." Graham stepped closer. "And you? How are you?" She glanced up at him, the question catching her off guard. "I'm good. Tired. But good. You gave him something yesterday that I couldn't." She gave a half smile. "You gave him the space to receive it. That matters, Graham." He nodded, jaw tightening a little like there was something he wanted to say, but hadn't yet figured out how. Just then, Beau stood from the table and crossed the room without a word, heading straight for the piano in the parlor. He climbed onto the bench, placed both hands flat on the keys, and pressed down. A single broken chord echoed through the house. Jasmine and Graham exchanged a look. It was the first time Beau had approached the piano alone. He struck another note, then paused, then repeated it with his left hand, slowly, tentatively. Jasmine stepped closer, careful not to startle him. "Would you like me to play with you?" she asked gently. Beau didn't respond, but he slid slightly to the left, making room. Jasmine sat beside him, laid her fingers over the keys, and began to play the soft melody he had hummed the day before, the one from the aquarium. She kept it slow, broken, open, a musical invitation. Beau followed, not always in time, not always in tune, but always present. Graham watched from the doorway, something in his chest pulling tight and full. His son, who once hadn't spoken for months, was now speaking in song. By the time the final notes faded, Jasmine turned to see Beau gently press his head against her shoulder. The silence afterward was sacred. "I think it's time," Graham said quietly that evening, standing with Jasmine on the front porch, the crickets beginning their nightly song. "Time for what?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself as the cool air set in. "To show you something I've kept hidden." Her brow furrowed. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. It's overdue." He led her through the house, past the kitchen, down a hall Jasmine hadn't explored. At the end was a small, locked door. Graham pulled a key from his pocket, slid it into the lock, and pushed it open. Inside was a room barely touched since Elise had passed. A music room. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains. On one wall, framed sheet music. On the shelves, vinyl records and photos. Elise in concert choirs. Elise on stage with a mic in hand. In every picture, she was smiling. Jasmine stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning the space. This was her sanctuary, Graham said. She'd come here when the world felt too much, or when Beau had meltdowns and she couldn't reach him. She sang here, prayed here. "It's beautiful," Jasmine whispered. She wanted Beau to know music, he added. But after she died, I couldn't even walk in here." Jasmine turned to him. "Why now?" "Because when you sang with Beau, I heard her again. Not her voice, but her presence. Like she'd been waiting for someone to keep that part of her alive." Jasmine looked around the room, her voice soft. "You don't have to carry her memory like it's a weight." Graham stepped closer. "It's starting to feel like a thread instead of a chain." She smiled at that. Then his tone shifted, quieter. "I need to ask you something." Jasmine braced herself. "I know this wasn't the plan. You were only supposed to be here for a few months. But I was wondering, hoping, if maybe you'd consider staying longer." Her breath caught. "You don't have to answer now," he added quickly. "And I'm not asking for anything you're not ready for." She nodded slowly, thoughts spinning. "I need time, Graham." "Of course. I care about you. And Beau. More than I expected." That's all I needed to hear. They stood in the room for another long minute, surrounded by the quiet imprint of someone who had once meant everything, and still did, in a way. But now, something new was growing in that space. Something tender and unspoken. That night, Jasmine sat outside the guest cottage, flipping through an old photo album her aunt had brought by. Pictures of her and Terence as kids, playing piano, singing in church, laughing during storms. Miss Luella joined her with 2 mugs of cocoa, settling in beside her. "You got a glow, baby." Jasmine smiled, without looking up. "He asked me to stay." Luella didn't respond right away. "And what did you say?" "I said I needed time." Luella nodded. "Good. But don't take too long. Some hearts close if they wait too long with the door open." Jasmine looked up at the stars, Beau's melody still echoing in her chest. She didn't know yet what her final answer would be. But she knew this. She was already more rooted than she'd ever meant to be. The Whitaker estate had grown quieter over the past few days, but not in a way that felt empty. It was the kind of quiet that followed restoration, like a piano left open after someone finally played a familiar song. Jasmine moved through the house with a gentleness that had become second nature, checking on Beau's sensory space, tidying the reading nook, humming softly without realizing it. But that morning, something felt off. It began with the mail. She was heading back from her walk with Miss Luella when Rosa waved her down near the front gate. "Miss Jasmine," Rosa called, concern in her voice. "There's something you might want to look at before Graham sees it." Rosa handed over a plain ivory envelope with embossed lettering. Jasmine turned it over slowly. The return address read, "Claire Hensley, Family Law Offices." Her breath tightened. "What is it?" Luella asked, catching the tension in Jasmine's shoulders. Jasmine slipped a fingernail beneath the seal and unfolded the letter. Her eyes scanned the page, once, twice. Then she exhaled. "She's petitioned for guardianship review." Luella's brows pulled together. "Of Beau?" Jasmine nodded. "She's filed a formal inquiry, questioning Graham's judgment and mental fitness following Elise's death, citing Beau's development and exposure to non-family caregivers." Luella placed a steadying hand on her arm. "That woman's gone too far." "She's coming after custody," Jasmine said, her voice tight but measured. "Or at least trying to force Graham to appoint a conservator." By the time Jasmine reached the study, Graham was already holding a copy of the same letter. He stood by the fireplace, one hand on the mantel, the other gripping the paper like it might burst into flame. "She filed this without even a conversation," he muttered. "Just went behind my back, made it look like I'm unfit." She's not trying to win, Jasmine said. She's trying to control. He looked up at her, jaw clenched. And she's going to drag Beau through a legal mess just to do it. She's banking on the court questioning your emotional stability, your grief, your decision-making. Graham dropped into the nearest chair. What if it works? Jasmine crossed the room, kneeling in front of him. It won't. But we have to be smart. We can't react out of anger. I'm not angry, he said. I'm tired. I've spent the last year rebuilding a life around Beau. And just when I start to feel like I'm getting somewhere, like we're okay, she does this. She sees your healing as a threat to her influence, Jasmine said gently. She always has. Graham's voice softened. And you? She held his gaze. I see it as a gift. That afternoon, a meeting was held in the conservatory. Graham, Jasmine, Miss Luella, and Isaiah sat at the round table, papers spread out, tension thick in the air. She's bringing a family court advocate, Graham explained. They'll conduct a home study, interviews, observations. Then let them observe, Jasmine said. Let them see the truth. Luella nodded firmly. That boy's more himself now than I've ever seen, and we all know it. Still, the pressure began to mount. Jasmine felt it in the way people at the market spoke a little too carefully. How neighbors who once waved now avoided eye contact. And worst of all, the comments online. Someone had taken a photo of her and Beau at the aquarium, posted it with a caption dripping in insinuation. Millionaire's nanny or something more, the headline read. Graham had been furious. This is harassment. But Jasmine had simply said, it's a distraction. Yet as the week wore on, even her resilience began to fray. One evening, while Beau was drawing quietly at the kitchen table, Graham approached her in the pantry, away from curious eyes. You okay? He asked. She nodded, then hesitated. I didn't come here to become a symbol, Graham. I came to care for a child. That's still my priority. He stepped closer. And what about us? She swallowed. That's what makes it harder. He searched her face. Do you regret this? Being here? No. She took a breath. But I hate that someone is using it to hurt you, to hurt Beau. Then we fight back, he said. Not with noise, with clarity. The next morning, Graham did something unexpected. He called a press conference. It wasn't flashy, no podium, just him standing on the front steps of the estate, Jasmine beside him, Beau in his arms. I want to speak clearly, he said to the cameras. My sister-in-law has raised concerns about my parenting. I understand grief can distort relationships, but I also know that my son is thriving, because he's surrounded by people who see him, love him, and meet him where he is. He turned slightly, glancing down at Beau, who rested his head on his shoulder. This is Jasmine Brooks. She's not a caregiver. She's a constant. And my son speaks because she listens. The reporters asked questions, but Graham didn't stay to answer them. He turned, walked inside, and closed the door behind them. In the quiet foyer, Jasmine looked at him. That was brave. So was staying, he replied. Later that evening, Beau stood in the music room again, pressing one key at a time, humming softly. Jasmine joined him, placing her hand beside his on the piano. I think he's ready, she whispered. For what? To tell his own story. Beau pressed another note, then, slowly, said the word, safe. Graham turned, voice breaking. What did you say? Beau looked up at him, then back at Jasmine. Safe, And just like that, everything sharpened into clarity. They were no longer just surviving scandal, pressure, or grief. They were standing in the middle of something whole, something real. The hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. By Thursday evening, the Whittaker house felt like it was holding its breath. Every room echoed with the same quiet tension. Preparation dressed in calm, but tight at the seams. Jasmine sat at the small desk in the guest cottage, flipping through the binder Miss Luella had helped her organize. Notes on Beau's progress, therapy milestones, music interaction logs, letters from specialists and neighbors. It was all there, all true. But her hands still trembled. She closed the binder and looked out the window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the magnolia trees in the yard. Her reflection hovered in the pane, uncertain eyes, drawn shoulders, a quiet strength fighting to stay upright. A soft knock tapped at the door. It opened a second later. Graham. He stepped in, still in his work clothes, but the loosened tie and the rain-damp hair made him look younger, tired but open. "You look like you haven't breathed in hours," he said gently. "Because I haven't," Jasmine replied with a dry laugh. He crossed the room, sat on the edge of the chair across from her. "We're going to be okay," he said. "You don't know that. I know Beau trusts you, and I know I do too." She didn't look away. "Do you also know what happens if they rule in Claire's favor? If the judge even partially agrees with her, they could assign someone new, someone Beau doesn't know, someone who doesn't sing with him, who doesn't understand his quiet." "They won't," he said too quickly. Then after a beat, "But if they did, I'd fight it with everything I have." Jasmine exhaled slowly, lowering her gaze. "I've fought before, Graham. For my brother. For kids I nursed through surgeries. For people no one else stood up for. But this is different. This isn't just work." He stood and walked to her, kneeling in front of the chair. His hands cupped hers, steady. "I know it isn't." Jasmine's voice softened, cracked. "He said he was safe." "I know," Graham whispered. "He's never said that before." "Not once. Until you." Silence bloomed again, full of meaning. Then came the twist of the knife. Rosa appeared in the doorway, her face pale, holding a folded printout in one hand. "You should see this," she said, voice unsteady. Jasmine took the paper and unfolded it slowly. It was an article. This one printed, posted, shared by a local parenting blog. "Caregiver romance or ethical breach. Sources reveal Nurse Jasmine Brooks. Prior conflicts in Atlanta hospice program." She blinked. Once, twice. It included her name, a distorted version of her past work, taken out of context, painted like impropriety. Graham read over her shoulder, then stepped back, his chest heaving. "This is Claire," he muttered. "She's trying to discredit you. She dug into your past." Jasmine stared at the words, each one burning her skin. "It's half true." He turned to her. "What?" "I did advocate against a hospice administrator in Atlanta," she said slowly. "He was cutting corners, pushing patients out early to make numbers look better. I filed a formal report. 2 weeks later, they terminated me, said I'd overstepped." "And you never said anything?" "Because it felt like failure," she whispered. "And I didn't want to bring that shadow here." "You didn't fail," Graham said. "You stood up for people who had no voice." She swallowed hard. "But now, Claire's twisting it, making it look like I'm reckless. Like I bring drama. Then we bring the truth, he said. We don't hide. Not now. That night, Jasmine couldn't sleep. She sat by the window again, Beau's lullaby humming under her breath. Her phone buzzed quietly. A text from Miss Luella. If they try to use your past against you, remember, truth is the only thing that walks in without apology. Friday arrived with silver skies and a cool breeze. The courthouse wasn't far, but the drive felt long. Inside, the family courtroom was modest, quiet. A judge, a clerk, no jury. Claire sat with her lawyer, lips pursed, a stack of folders in front of her like weapons. Beau stayed home with Rosa. Graham sat beside Jasmine at the respondents' table. It wasn't loud. No theatrics. But every word was heavy. Claire's lawyer leaned into the microphone. We are simply asking the court to assess whether Mr. Whittaker's grief has clouded his judgment, and whether the presence of a caregiver who has a history of boundary issues constitutes a stable environment for a child on the spectrum. Jasmine didn't flinch, but her fingers curled tight under the table. Then it was her turn. The judge invited her to speak. She stood. Her voice was soft at first, but firm. My name is Jasmine Brooks. I've been a nurse for 8 years. I've worked in pediatric palliative care, rehabilitation, and behavioral therapy. My brother is autistic. He taught me more about listening than any textbook. She looked at Claire, then back at the judge. I am not here because of romantic speculation. I'm here because Beau Whittaker said one word to me that he hadn't said in over a year. Mama. And then another word. Safe. I didn't give him those words. He gave them to me, because someone finally listened long enough for him to speak. She let the silence sit, then finished. I will not apologize for showing up. Not for love, not for truth. When she sat down, Graham reached under the table and took her hand. The judge didn't speak right away, but the court clerk looked up, eyes glossy. A few minutes later, the judge announced a recess before the final recommendation. And in that moment, between verdict and silence, Jasmine knew something had changed. Not just for Beau, but for all of them. The courthouse was quiet when the judge returned. The click of her heels on the polished floor echoed like a metronome. Steady, final. Everyone sat up straighter. Jasmine's palms were damp, her heartbeat a soft drum behind her ribs. Graham didn't look at her, but his hand hadn't moved from hers since she spoke. He was grounding her, and maybe she was grounding him too. The judge took her seat and glanced down at the papers before her. She adjusted her glasses, breathed once, and began. I've reviewed the filed complaint, the supporting documentation, and the in-person testimony. What we have here is not just a case of familial concern, but one clouded by unresolved grief, reputational anxiety, and a struggle for control. Claire sat up straighter, her lawyer motionless beside her. The judge continued, her voice calm but resolute. What is clear to this court is that Beau Whittaker, a minor on the autism spectrum, is currently experiencing significant emotional and communicative improvement. Testimonies from his care team, neighbors, and written reports support that this progress has occurred under Mr. Whittaker's legal guardianship, and with the consistent presence of Mrs. Jasmine Brooks. Jasmine felt her breath stall. The court sees no evidence of neglect, instability, or impropriety. Quite the opposite. I find no reason to alter Mr. Whittaker's custody or restrict Mrs. Brooks's continued role in Beau's care. A faint sound of breath escaped Graham's lips. The judge looked directly at Claire, I strongly suggest that familial disputes be handled with the child's well-being, not ego, as the primary consideration moving forward. Claire's face didn't move, but her shoulders dropped. It was the first crack in her polished armor. Court was adjourned. Jasmine didn't cry, not right away, not until they were out of the courtroom and back in the car, Beau in the back seat, calm, tapping his fingers against the window in a familiar rhythm. And then she exhaled, not the shaky, fearful kind, a deep, earned release. "They can't take him from us," she said, her voice a whisper. Graham looked at her. They never could. But it wasn't until they pulled into the driveway of the Whittaker house, welcomed by Miss Luella on the porch, Rosa holding Beau's favorite blanket, Isaiah leaning against the railing with a rare smile, that Jasmine finally let the tears come, not out of fear, out of relief. That night, the house was full again, not just with people, but with sound. Rosa made gumbo and peach cobbler. Luella told stories about her own courthouse days, throwing her arms wide and making Jasmine laugh until her ribs hurt. And Beau sat at the piano, playing soft, repeating melodies, some from memory, some from feeling. Graham stood beside Jasmine in the doorway to the music room, a mug of tea in his hand, his other hand resting lightly against the small of her back. "I didn't think I'd ever hear music in this room again," he said. "It never left," Jasmine replied. "It just needed a reason to come back." Beau pressed one more note, then turned and walked toward Jasmine. He reached for her hand, and in the softest voice he asked, "Song?" She knelt. "Which one, baby?" He pointed to her chest. "Yours." Jasmine's breath caught. "You remember it?" He nodded, and so she sang, softly, like the first night. Only now, the melody didn't sound like comfort for a stranger. It sounded like home. Beau leaned against her, resting his head against her shoulder. And this time, he sang the last line with her. Off-key, barely above a whisper, but unmistakably there. Graham's eyes glistened. "He knows." Jasmine looked at him. "Knows what?" "That love isn't leaving." Later that night, once Beau had gone to bed and the house had quieted, Jasmine stood barefoot in the garden. The wind moved slow through the trees, and the scent of honeysuckle lingered on the air. Graham joined her, wordless, until finally he asked, "What now?" She turned to face him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, now that you're free to go, no court looming, no threat overhead." "What do you want?" Jasmine held his gaze. The moonlight softened everything. "I want mornings that start with piano keys. I want dinner tables that always have room for one more. I want quiet, steady love, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself to feel real." He stepped closer. "Do you want it here?" "Yes," she whispered. "With you, with Beau." Graham didn't kiss her then. He didn't need to. He just pulled her close and held her, forehead resting against hers. And in the hush of the garden, their hearts answered each other, without a single word. The next morning broke with the hush of late summer air, a rare kind of stillness that seemed to wrap around the Whittaker house like a held breath. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, warming the edges of the breakfast table where Beau carefully arranged colored pencils in a neat line. Jasmine poured orange juice, watching him from across the counter. He was humming again, low, melodic, tuneful. A habit now, like breathing. She didn't say anything, didn't want to break the rhythm. Instead, she turned back to the stove, flipping the last pancake onto a plate, just as Graham walked in, still barefoot, his button-down shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "Something smells like weekend," he said, grinning. "Only if you don't burn the bacon," Jasmine replied, tossing him the oven mitt. He caught it, laughing, and opened the oven door. Touché. They moved like they'd always been doing this, sidestepping each other in the kitchen, reading unspoken cues. Jasmine didn't realize how natural it had become until she glanced at Beau again. He was watching them, not just looking, watching, and for the first time he smiled, a full, unguarded smile. Jasmine's breath hitched. Graham saw it too, and they both froze for just a moment, letting it land. Then Graham whispered, "We're getting somewhere." After breakfast, Rosa offered to take Beau on a walk to the park down the street. Jasmine helped him put on his shoes, and when he looked up at her with his quiet, steady gaze, he said something new. "Stay close." Jasmine blinked, heart swelling. "Always." As the front door closed behind them, Graham stepped in, voice softer now. "He's opening like a flower, Jazz. You see it, don't you?" She nodded. "He's blooming." They stood there in the quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound between them. And then Graham broke the silence. "I've been holding on to something. I don't know why I didn't show you sooner." He turned and disappeared down the hallway. When he came back, he was holding a small wooden box. Inside, a stack of journals, worn, leather-bound, the edges frayed with time. "Elise's," he said, offering them to her. Jasmine hesitated. "Are you sure?" "She always said she wanted Beau to know her one day. I think you should help me figure out how." They sat together on the living room couch, knees touching, and opened the first book. The handwriting was elegant, spiraled and slanted. The first entry was dated nearly 8 years ago. "Beau wouldn't sleep tonight. He cried for hours, but only stopped when I started singing. I held him close and hummed, until I couldn't feel the clock ticking anymore. Maybe that's what love is, losing track of time inside someone else's breath." Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, the words settling deep in her. They kept reading, entry after entry, memories, struggles, hopes. And then, near the middle of the second journal, they found it. "If anything happens to me, I hope Beau finds someone who hears him before he speaks. Someone who doesn't need noise to understand his needs. And I hope Graham finds someone who reminds him that love isn't something you only get once. It's something you choose, again and again." Jasmine's throat tightened. "She saw you," Graham whispered, "before she even knew you." Tears slipped down Jasmine's cheek before she could stop them. "You should show him these one day." "I will," Graham said. "With you." Later that afternoon, Miss Luella stopped by with fresh lavender and 2 peach hand pies. She placed one in Jasmine's hands, then peered at her with that wise, no-nonsense gaze. "I heard about the journals," she said. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "You really do know everything." "I just listen better than most," Luella replied. "Now listen to me. If Elise's words tell you anything, let them remind you that you don't need to carry guilt to carry her memory. You're not erasing her by being here. You're honoring her, step by step." That night, Beau asked for music before bed. He patted the space beside him on the floor, right next to the beanbag chair covered in little stars. Jasmine sat. She began to hum the familiar tune, and Beau joined in, barely above a whisper, swaying gently. Graham watched from the doorway. After the song faded, Beau leaned his head against her arm. And softly, he asked, "You stay forever?" Jasmine didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't know, but because she wanted the moment to stretch, to settle, to feel real. Then she said, "If that's what you want." Bo nodded once. "Want you?" In the hallway, Graham wiped his eyes and whispered, "So do I." And this time, Jasmine didn't look away. The sun rose soft and golden across the Whitaker property, gilding the porch rails and dappling the tall trees in the front yard. Jasmine stood barefoot on the back steps, a mug of coffee in her hands, the scent mingling with the earth's quiet breath after last night's rain. The air felt different, not new exactly, but shifted, like the storm had moved something in her too. Behind her, the screen door creaked, and Graham stepped out. His presence didn't startle her. It never did anymore. He moved like someone who'd always known how to share space without taking it. "Morning," he said, voice low. She looked at him. "Barefoot too?" He lifted one heel and smirked. "Thought I'd match the mood." They stood in silence for a while. Not awkward, just full. The kind of silence you only get after surviving something together. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about the house, about the room Elise used to use, the one Bo calls the music room now." Jasmine turned slightly. "I want to turn it into something permanent," he continued. "Not a memorial, something alive, a therapy and music space, for Bo, maybe even for other kids. We could bring in some of the local therapists, make it something bigger than just us." She blinked. "That's beautiful, Graham. It's something Elise would have wanted, and something you've helped me imagine again." He took a step closer. "And if you're still thinking about staying, Jasmine, really staying, I want this to be our home, not mine, ours." Jasmine's chest ached with the weight of it, the offer, the intention, the open door. Before she could respond, Bo's voice echoed faintly from inside. "Song?" They both turned, smiling. Inside the house, Jasmine found Bo at the piano, already seated, fingers hovering like he was waiting for permission. Jasmine took her place beside him. "Do you want to lead today?" she asked. He nodded, and then, without prompting, he began to play. Slowly, a melody she hadn't taught him, but recognized all the same. It was Elise's lullaby, one he must have heard 100 times and buried deep inside. Graham appeared in the doorway, his breath catching. Jasmine didn't sing. She just played along, letting Bo's hands tell the story. And when he finished, he didn't look at her. He looked at his father. Graham stepped into the room slowly. "Did your mom teach you that one, buddy?" Bo nodded. Graham knelt beside him. "She'd be so proud of you. You know that?" Bo's eyes filled, and without a word, he leaned into his father's arms. Jasmine turned away just long enough to wipe her own eyes. Later that day, they invited Miss Luella, Rosa, and even Claire, yes, Claire, over for dinner. It was Graham's idea. Jasmine had hesitated at first, but something in her knew it was time. Time to soften edges, mend what could be mended, even if it wasn't perfect. Claire arrived with a small bouquet of gardenias and a guarded expression. Jasmine met her at the door, accepted the flowers, and said thank you with a smile that meant more than words. The dinner was warm, loud, a little chaotic, but filled with laughter. Rosa told stories. Miss Luella drank sweet tea like it was scandal. And Claire watched Bo carefully, like she was seeing him for the first time. At one point, Jasmine found her standing alone near the kitchen window. "I don't think I ever understood him," Claire said quietly. "Not really. You tried." Jasmine replied. Sometimes we just need to be shown a different way. Claire glanced over at Beau, now giggling on the floor as he watched Isaiah do a silly imitation of a saxophone player. "He's happy," she said. "That's all I ever wanted. Even if I got lost trying." Jasmine touched her arm gently. "It's not too late to be part of his life." Claire nodded, her eyes shining. "Thank you for not shutting me out." The evening ended with music again. Graham brought out his old record player, and they sat on the porch as a soft blues melody played into the dusk. Jasmine leaned back against Graham's shoulder, her hand in his, watching Beau sway on the porch swing, Rosa beside him, humming along. And just before the sky turned completely dark, Beau stood up, walked over to Jasmine, and whispered something into her ear. She turned to Graham, blinking in awe. "What did he say?" Graham asked. Jasmine smiled through tears. "He said she'd like it here." And she knew. Beau was talking about Elise. In that moment, it wasn't just healing, it was becoming whole. The morning of the dedication bloomed with a golden hush, like even the air was holding its breath. Jasmine stood in front of the mirror in the cottage, smoothing the hem of her soft linen dress. Her hands trembled slightly, not out of fear, but from the magnitude of what this day meant. Today, the music room would become something more than a room. It would be named, opened, and offered to the world. Elise's Garden of Sound, the new plaque would read. A space for children like Beau to explore music, emotion, and silence without fear of misunderstanding. A space born from love, loss, and something miraculous that had unfolded between grief and grace. Behind her, Beau stood quietly, holding a single white flower. "You ready, baby?" Jasmine asked. He nodded, but didn't speak. His eyes met hers in the mirror, and she smiled. "Then let's go." The yard was already full when they stepped outside. Neighbors, friends, former nurses, a few local therapists. Even Claire had returned, this time with her son from Boston, an elementary school music teacher who had volunteered to help with the program. Graham stood near the front porch, wearing a navy jacket and the soft, vulnerable look Jasmine had come to love. He saw her, and the way his face changed, eased, lit up, sent a flutter straight through her. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice quiet when she reached him. "And you're overdressed," she teased gently. "Had to compete with the woman who turned my house into a home again." Rosa handed Jasmine a small envelope. "A little something for your pocket," she said. Inside was a photo. Elise at the old piano, her hand on a much younger Beau's back. They were both laughing, wide and unfiltered. Jasmine pressed the photo to her heart. When it was time, Graham stepped up to the small wooden podium in the garden. The vines were just beginning to curl around the archway, lavender blooming in tidy rows. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice calm but filled with depth. "This house was once quiet, too quiet. Not the kind of silence that soothes, but the kind that hollows. After Elise passed, I didn't think I'd ever hear joy in these walls again." He glanced at Jasmine. "But life," he continued, "has a way of whispering healing through unexpected people. Jasmine Brooks walked into our lives with no fanfare, no promises, just presence. And through her care, her song, and her stubborn heart, my son found his voice again, and I found mine." Jasmine looked down, blinking back tears. "This space is not a shrine," Graham said. "It's a beginning. It's a room where noise isn't a requirement for connection, where music can mean movement, stillness, eye contact, or none of the above." He paused. "It's a tribute to Elise, and to everyone who keeps showing up for someone, even when it's hard." He stepped back, and Jasmine was next. The small crowd quieted as she approached. Beau stood beside her, still holding the flower. Jasmine looked out and saw Miss Luella near the back, nodding gently like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. "I never expected to stay," Jasmine began. "I came here trying to outrun my own grief. I stayed because I learned that healing isn't something you do alone. It's something you invite, something you build day by day with patience and laughter, and even the quiet moments where nothing seems to move. But everything changes." She turned to look at Beau. "This little boy reminded me that we don't need perfect words to love each other. We just need to listen, to see." Then she knelt beside him. "You ready, buddy?" Beau nodded and placed the white flower on the corner of the new wooden sign, just beneath Elise's name. The room opened officially at noon. Children filtered in with their parents, touching instruments, exploring textures, feeling the vibrations of sound with their hands. Graham walked Jasmine through the doorway, hand gently at her back. It looked different now. The sunlight was warmer, the shelves lined with new sensory tools, cushions on the floor, a record player beside the piano. Jasmine's old guitar leaned in the corner, waiting. Beau walked to the piano without hesitation, lifted the lid, and played the opening notes of the lullaby. Then, to everyone's quiet surprise, he turned and pointed at Jasmine. "Sing." She did, and the room filled. Later that night, once the guests were gone and the lights were low, Jasmine sat on the porch swing. Beau had long since gone to sleep, curled up under his weighted blanket, humming faintly in his dreams. Graham brought her a blanket and a glass of iced tea. "Well," he said, "you made it." Jasmine leaned her head against his shoulder. "I didn't make it. We made it." "I was thinking," he said after a long pause, "about something Elise used to say." "What was that?" "That love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just someone who stays." He looked at her. "You stayed." Jasmine smiled. "I found home." Then she pulled a small box from the side table. Inside was a photo of them three: Beau, Graham, Jasmine, standing in the garden under the new sign. She handed it to him. "Thought we could put it by the piano." He turned it over. On the back, she'd written a single word: family. And as the stars blinked open above them, Graham took her hand, squeezed it gently, and said the word she hadn't known how much she needed to hear: forever. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. Thanks for watching Camillia Story, where kindness meets real life. At Camillia Story, we believe every act of generosity deserves to be shared. So stay tuned and keep spreading hope with Camillia Story.